Imagine getting a phone call late at night, and on the other end you can hear your mother being attacked.
That horrifying experience became a reality for John, a young man from Dayton, Ohio, back in 2001. But this story gets even more complicated because it's intertwined with the unsolved murder of his 18-year-old girlfriend, Desana Wilkerson. You brought us a case that is both heartbreaking and mysterious, and we're ready to dive in.
It's a case that has haunted the Dayton community for over 2 decades, and for good reason. Desana was a bright young woman with dreams of becoming a nurse. Her life was cut short in such a brutal way, and there are still so many unanswered questions.
You've given us a lot to go on: police reports, court documents, even interviews with detectives and family members. So our mission is to piece together the timeline, examine the suspects, and really try to understand what happened to Desana.
And I think it's important to remember that while we're exploring the facts of the case, there are real people who have been deeply affected by this tragedy, so we'll approach this with sensitivity and respect for everyone involved. Absolutely. So let's start with Desana herself.
Yeah.
What kind of person was she?
Desana was, by all accounts, a truly special young woman. She was a recent high school graduate, excited about her future as a nurse. She had a close relationship with her mother, Danita, and was well-liked by everyone who knew her.
It sounds like she had a strong support system,
Yeah.
which makes her sudden disappearance even more puzzling.
Exactly. And her relationship with her boyfriend's mother, Beth, adds another layer to this story. They were so close that Desana considered Beth a second mom.
So walk us through the night she vanished. What do we know about her last known movements?
Well, on October 21st, 2001, Desana was working the late shift at a local nursing home. Her mom, Danita, dropped her off at her boyfriend John's house a little after 11 p.m.
Did anything seem out of the ordinary?
Not initially. Desana went inside, chatted with Beth for a bit, and then
Yeah.
stepped out to take a phone call. And that's where things take a turn.
Because she never came back from that phone call.
That's right. She vanished into the night, leaving her loved ones worried and confused. John called her repeatedly, but her phone went straight to voicemail. By the next day, panic had set in.
I can't imagine the agony of not knowing what happened to your child.
Mm.
What did they do next?
Both John and Danita searched everywhere for her. They went to her apartment, but it was undisturbed. There was no sign of a struggle, no indication of where she might have gone.
So no forced entry,
Yeah.
nothing missing from the apartment.
Exactly. It seemed like she had just stepped out for a moment and vanished.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the mystery only deepens from there.
What happened next?
The following morning, around 11:30 a.m., police received reports of a body found in an alleyway in West Dayton.
And this was?
It was Desana. The scene was horrific. She had been brutally beaten and strangled. Her hands were bound with her own shoelaces, and a sock had been stuffed in her mouth. It was a clear sign that someone wanted to silence her.
That's a chilling detail. Did the police have any initial suspects?
Given the circumstances, John was immediately questioned. There was a significant age gap between him and Desana, which raised some red flags for investigators.
Understandable.
Yeah.
Did they have any other leads?
John cooperated fully with the police, providing an alibi for the night of Desana's disappearance. His story was corroborated by friends who were with him at a pub that night. Beth, John's mother, also confirmed that Desana seemed relaxed when she arrived at their house. There was no indication that she was in any kind of trouble.
So if John's was cleared, where did the investigation go from there?
Detectives then turned their attention to Danita, Desana's mother. She described Desana as a loving daughter with no known enemies. She couldn't understand who would want to harm her. However, she did suggest speaking to Desana's co-workers, hoping they might have some insight into her life or any recent conflicts.
And did those interviews lead anywhere?
They did uncover something interesting. A coworker named Frank had recently gotten into a physical altercation with Desana just a few days before her murder.
Okay, so we have a possible suspect with a motive.
It certainly seemed that way at first. Frank had apparently developed a crush on Desana and became aggressive when she rejected his advances.
So they had a fight at work.
Yes. And it was serious enough that other coworkers had to intervene. The police questioned Frank, and he admitted to the fight and his feelings for Desana. He claimed to have been too forward and that she shut him down forcefully.
Did his alibi check out?
Interestingly enough, it did. Detectives found him to be truthful during the interview. He even agreed to a polygraph, but it couldn't be completed due to medication he was taking at the time.
So even though there was a conflict, and Frank had feelings for Desana, the police didn't consider him a strong suspect.
Exactly. They moved on to other leads. But just when the case seemed to be going cold, something shocking happened, just 5 weeks after Desana's murder. Beth, John's mother, was attacked in her own home.
Hold on. This is the same house where Desana was last seen.
That's right. And the attack on Beth shared some disturbing similarities with Desana's murder. It was a terrifying ordeal. Beth was assaulted in the very same house where Desana was last seen alive. And what's even more chilling is that the attacker used shoelaces to bind her. Just like Desana, he even tried to escape through the bathroom window.
Wow. Those parallels are really disturbing. Did Beth know her attacker?
She did. It turned out to be one of John's friends. To protect his privacy, let's call him Sam.
Okay. So now there's a possible connection between Desana's murder and someone who was close to her boyfriend. Did the police ever get a chance to question this Sam?
Unfortunately, no. Sam vanished before the police could bring him in for questioning about either attack.
So it sounds like the investigation hit another dead end.
Not completely. They couldn't locate Sam right away, but they could dig into his past. And what they found painted a very troubling picture.
What did they uncover?
It turned out that Sam had a history of violence against women back in 1986. When he was just a teenager, he was convicted of sexual assault and ended up spending 9 years in prison.
That's a huge red flag. Did his pattern of violence continue after he was released?
Sadly, it did. Years later, he brutally attacked another woman named Deb. He hit her so hard that she needed 14 stitches. He also tried to stab her. But thankfully, the knife hit a medallion she was wearing. It may have saved her life.
It's terrifying to think about how differently that could have ended. If she hadn't been wearing that medallion, it really makes you wonder if there's a connection to Desana's case.
The similarities are definitely hard to ignore. And there's another chilling detail. While he was attacking Deb, Sam threatened her with sexual violence. It fits a pattern of escalating violence against women.
So what happened with Sam? Was he ever held accountable for the attack on Beth?
Yes, thankfully. In January of 2003, Sam resurfaced and was finally arrested for the attack on Beth. But here's where the case takes another unexpected turn. During Sam's trial, Beth revealed something she hadn't told the police before.
What was it?
Beth revealed that in addition to the assault, Sam had also raped her that night.
That's a bombshell. Why didn't she tell the police initially?
Beth explained that she didn't disclose the rape out of fear for her son, John. She was terrified that if John found out what Sam had done, he would try to retaliate and end up in trouble with the law.
It's heartbreaking to think about the impossible situation she was in. It took a lot of courage for her to come forward with that information, even if it was years later.
It absolutely did. And while this revelation strengthened the case against Sam for attacking Beth, it also raised serious questions about his potential involvement in Desana's murder.
So what happened with the trial? Was he convicted?
He was, but not for everything. Sam ended up taking a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to aggravated robbery and kidnapping, and in exchange, the assault and rape charges were dropped.
Wait, so he wasn't held accountable for the sexual violence against Beth?
Unfortunately, that's how the plea deal worked out. He was ultimately sentenced to 7 years in prison.
What about Desana's case? Did the police ever get any closer to connecting Sam to her murder?
While Sam was serving his sentence, detectives took the opportunity to gather more evidence. They obtained a search warrant for his DNA and compared it to the samples collected from Desana's body back in 2001.
That sounds promising.
Yeah.
Did the DNA match?
Unfortunately, the technology at that time wasn't advanced enough to provide conclusive results. It was a setback. But the detectives didn't give up hope.
So the case went cold again.
Yeah.
But it sounds like there was still a chance that DNA evidence could solve it in the future.
Exactly. In 2009 and 2010, they resubmitted the evidence for testing as DNA technology continued to improve. But unfortunately, even with those advancements, the results still came back inconclusive. It was incredibly frustrating for everyone involved, especially for Desana's family.
That's heartbreaking. It must have felt like they were so close to getting answers, but were
Uh-huh.
just out of reach.
Absolutely. But even with these setbacks, the detectives never gave up on finding justice for Desana. In recent years, they've enlisted the help of the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, or BCI, which has access to even more cutting-edge DNA technology.
So what makes the BCI different?
They have a reputation for being incredibly meticulous. They re-examine evidence thoroughly to ensure its integrity and reliability. They've even been able to extract DNA from sources that might have seemed impossible years ago, things like tiny clothing fibers. It's given them incredible success in solving other cold cases.
It sounds like they're leaving no stone unturned. What's the latest with Desana's case, if they found anything new?
The Dayton Cold Case Unit submitted Desana's case to the BCI in November of last year. They're still waiting for the results, which I'm sure is agonizing for her loved ones. But there's a lot of hope that with the BCI's expertise in advanced technology, they might finally get the answers they've been seeking for over 2 decades.
I certainly hope so.
Yeah.
This is a case that deserves to be solved. But you mentioned earlier that there's another unsettling development. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, there is. Sam has been out of prison for several years now and is living right there in Dayton.
That's a chilling thought. He served his time, but now he's back in the same community where these horrific crimes took place. Is there any indication that he might be involved in other unsolved cases?
Detective May, the lead investigator on Desana's case, seems to think so. He's been looking into similar cases from the 90s and early 2000s that match Sam's MO, and he's already found some potential connections.
Look what?
Well, one case that stands out is from 1999. It involved a robbery, the use of shoelaces to bind the victim, and a sexual assault, and happened just blocks from where Sam was living at the time.
It's terrifying to think that there might be other victims out there who have been living with this trauma for years, maybe afraid to come forward.
That's exactly why Detective May is urging anyone who may have been attacked by Sam to contact the Dayton Police Department. They believe there could be unreported cases, and every piece of information is crucial.
So if anyone listening has any information about Sam,
Yeah.
even if it seems insignificant, they should reach out to the police.
Absolutely. Even a small detail could help connect the dots and bring justice for Desana, and potentially prevent future tragedies. Sometimes a seemingly insignificant memory, like a phone number or a specific location, can be the missing piece of the puzzle.
It's never too late to seek justice.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that sharing your story can not only help bring a perpetrator to account, but also empower other survivors and potentially prevent future harm.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, but I want to go back to the phone call Desana received right before she disappeared. It seems like a crucial piece of the puzzle. Do we have any information about who might have been on the other end of the line?
Unfortunately, that detail remains a mystery. The phone records from that night didn't provide any conclusive answers, but it's a question that continues to haunt investigators and Desana's family. Who called her that night, and what did they want? Was it someone she knew, or was it a complete stranger? Was it connected to her murder, or was it a tragic coincidence?
It's hard to imagine the torment of not knowing those answers. It's like a missing piece of the story that could change everything.
It really is. And while we may never know for sure who made that call, we can keep asking the questions, keep searching for answers, and keep Desana's memory alive.
Well, this has been a truly difficult but important deep dive. You've given us so much to think about. It's clear that this case is far from closed, and there's still hope for justice. But it also highlights the need for greater awareness and support for victims of violence.
I agree. Desana's case is a reminder that these crimes can happen anywhere, and we need to create a culture where victims feel safe and supported in coming forward.
What are some ways we can do that?
We can start by believing survivors, listening to their stories without judgment, and providing them with resources and access to support systems. We can educate ourselves about the warning signs of abuse and learn how to intervene safely if we suspect someone is in danger. And we can advocate for stronger laws and policies that protect victims and hold perpetrators accountable.
Those are all really important points. This case really highlights the ripple effects of violence and how it impacts not just the immediate victim, but also their loved ones and the entire community.
It does. And while the search for answers in Desana's case continues, we can all do our part to create a safer and more compassionate world for everyone.
Thank you for joining us on this difficult but necessary journey. Remember, even the smallest piece of information could be the missing link that brings justice for Desana, if you know anything, no matter how small it may seem. Please don't hesitate to contact the Dayton Police Department or Crime Stoppers. And if you or someone you know has been affected by violence, please know that you are not alone. There are resources available to help. You can find information on our website or by contacting the National Sexual Assault Hotline.
Thank you for listening.